and welcome to week 7 of Sensory Fitness Live. I am so happy that you could join us today. My name is Valerie, and I'm an occupational therapy intern here at HIR Wellness Institute. You may not know what occupational therapy is and how sensory fitness can go hand in hand with it. Well, OTs are mentors of hope, dignity, and function to help individuals reach their highest potential through methods as dynamic as each individual. Occupational therapists are enablers of independence and facilitators of passion to support long-term and meaningful goals of an individual. These episodes of Sensory Fitness Live will help address difficulties with homework, focusing, and sitting while virtual learning. COVID has caused some major disruptions in everyone's life, including children and their parents. School is happening very differently these days, and virtual learning could be really taking a toll on someone's body. We have to think and plan harder to have a flow, and sometimes I'm sure that there are more opportunities for meltdowns or feeling out of sorts. Meltdowns and tantrums are not misbehaviors. They are outward expressions of a child's inner distress. We have to look at what our children have lost during this pandemic, steering clear from setting the bar too high. On a more positive note, the pandemic has allowed time for us to get to know our children in a new light. We have to try to set them up to the most functional in the routines. Therefore, sensory fitness will help manage when you're feeling out of sorts by helping us to regulate our brains so that we have the focus, alertness, and connection to be in that just right, ready place, respond place. So relatives, last week, we learned more about our sense of touch and how if it doesn't provide clear, consistent information, then it may be more difficult to understand these types of differences visually or cognitively. We learned how different tactile activities can help a child modulate the tactile sensation and can be an important part of a sensory diet. Some of the examples that I mentioned as for tactile activities was that you can do at home with your child to play hide and seek or hide and find games in objects like objects in dry rice or dry beans. Play games where you would ask your child to describe an object being felt without looking at it. You could also have objects with different textures available to play and help your child discriminate between soft and hard, rough and scratchy, bumpy and smooth. I also talked about how you might have your child identify shapes or letters and numbers drawn on the back of their hands. And finally, to think about the different ways to involve like novel tactile experiences during play and daily activities. How did this go for you, relatives? Were you able to try out any of the options that I mentioned above? Leave us any comments down below, and we'd be happy to learn more about your experience. So this leads us into what we're going to be learning about today. We'll be learning more about sensory processing disorder and how it affects our body. But first, relatives, let's take a look at the speedometer again for a little refresher. Okay, so an engine that's running in a high gear may look like you're overwhelmed, frustrated, have tense posture. Your child may be cranky, fidgeting. They may be even angry, overly excited, or even fearful. If their engine is running too low, it may look like they are sad or discouraged. They may even have a slouchy posture, be sleepy, or have a lack of interest in activities. Just right here is when we feel happy and balanced. Our children switch into these different gears throughout the day. And we as parents move through these different gears too. But we do activities without really thinking about it to get us back to that just right gear. Keep in mind that we do travel through these different gears all day long, and it's okay. Sometimes we tend to stay in one of these three gears for most of the day, and that's okay too. We want to provide strategies for when the gear you are in isn't supportive with the task at hand. Relatives, we will now go over PACE to get us ready to learn the topic for today. PACE is a simple regulation strategy that helps support sensory processing using movement to wake up the brain and bring it to that just right gear. This helps us to also get into a better regulated state. PACE is a quick and easy way to get us back to that just right gear. So I invite you, relatives, to grab some water for this activity, which will help increase the electricity in our body. And now, from a seated position or standing, you will go down and touch your toes. And then you're going to come back up. Okay. And then just take a note of how that felt, relatives, for you, and then we'll revisit that in a little bit. Now, you're going to take one hand to your chest and the other hand to your belly and close your eyes and just breathe. And now take your left hand to your right knee and your right hand to your left knee. And we're just going to alternate as we go. Now, cross your ankles and put your arms in front of you. Put the back of your hands together, then reach over and clasp your fingers and bring your hands into your body and close your eyes. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, relatives. So now let's go again where we left off. We're going to go ahead and put our hands in front of us and then our back of our hands like this and cross over, clasp your fingers, bring it back to your body and close your eyes. Breathe. Just breathe normally. Then uncross your hands and uncross your ankles. And now bring your fingertips together. Down. Now, relatives, we're going to go back and touch our toes. And then come back up. What did you notice different? Let us know down below. And let us know how you're feeling. Did you notice a difference? In just a short time, we have caused the brain to be in a better regulated state. This is an example of improved sensory processing, which means more opportunities for learning and directing our attention, meaning that our brain is processing information more efficiently. With daily practice, or even doing this several times a day, PACE, you may notice that your child has an easier time focusing, paying attention, while they are engaged in either virtual learning or in their classroom to better grasp the information that is being presented to them either virtually or in the classroom. So relatives, today I will be talking more about sensory processing disorder, also known as PSD, or SPD, to give you some insight into what sensory processing disorder or dysfunction is. What is sensory processing disorder, you might ask? Well, it is a condition in which the brain has trouble receiving and responding to information that comes through our senses. Kids may be oversensitive to sensory input or undersensitive or both. You might ask, is sensory processing disorder a diagnosis? Well, the answer to that can be confusing. It is a yes and a no. It used to be a diagnosis for everyone, and you could get it formally diagnosed by a psychologist. However, now only ages 0 to 3 can be formally diagnosed. So you can no longer get that formal diagnosis. So then the second question people ask, since there isn't a formal diagnosis anymore, can my child still be treated without a formal diagnosis? And the answer is yes. So what you would do here is to get a referral to see an occupational therapist, where you would then be evaluated and would be asked to complete a client or caregiver survey. It is measured on a computer or a profile and through clinical observation to see if your child is having any difficulties or deficits with sensory processing. And from there, the occupational therapist would be able to treat your child by helping them learn how to manage their sensory challenges. Typically, the phrasing then would be sensory processing dysfunction or sensory processing deficits. Now, let's talk about how sensory processing affects the body. When you're thinking of sensory processing, you're thinking of your senses and how the input goes into your body. If you touch something, you feel it. Going back to our senses of hearing, typically, a child may show signs of auditory defensiveness, like crowded spaces. They can't really focus because it's so loud. Or maybe they are very, very distressed when they hear harsh sounds, or even typical sounds, such as a lawnmower or a vacuum. It really bothers them. They are unable to concentrate. Or they might even hear a fire alarm going off and don't even notice it. That's also a sign of sensory processing. To better explain how it affects the body and symptoms your child may be exhibiting, I will be referring back to our 7 senses. So now in regards to taste, when you think of your mouth, you think of the different tastes such as sour, sweet, and that's true. There also goes into the fact of how much your child feels in their mouth. Is there a lot of food? Or sometimes your child might overstuff food in their mouth because they can't feel what's in it. It could also be that they lick random objects, or they really like intense flavors, like a lot of salt or a lot of sweetness, or they like to suck on lemons or limes. And now let's talk about our sense of smell. With this, it could be that your child is very, very sensitive to a lot of smells that we typically don't notice. For example, it could be the smell of something such as a hard-boiled egg. They wouldn't be able to handle being in the same room. To them, it would be such a strong odor that they would have to get out of the room. And this happens a lot with food. If something has a strong smell, they won't want to eat it because it's too strong for them. Now, let's talk about our vision sense. When you think of your vision, you might think it's just seeing things. That's true. But it could also be that a space is really, really crowded, so your child can't really focus because there's so much going on and they need to look around them all the time. Also, it could be that really bright lights bother them and they prefer dim lighting. Or maybe they like really bright lights because it helps keep them alert and aroused. Or they might like to watch objects spin or watch different things move, like watching fish in a tank. Or they might just really like those bright colors. And now we'll go into our touch or tactile sense. So when you think of that, you may think it's the way things feel. And that's true. Your child might also talk about clothes textures that they don't like, as well as the seams in their clothes, um, zippers, things like that. It could also be that they're cold. It could be temperature of items, the temperatures of food even, because your mouth is lined with skin. So it goes into that whole tactile system. They might not even like certain textures, They don't like getting wet or dirty. They become very, very distressed about that. Or they really like soft objects, or they like to touch everything in the store. Now, let's talk about our proprioception sense, which is a concept of where your body is in space, and your child may be described as clumsy. And that typically is a proprioception deficit, or they crash into items, they move a lot, and they're constantly falling or doing something to get that input that their muscles and joints need because they just don't have it. Or they're just hanging out and they're really low because they need that input to get going to become alert. And the last sense I want to talk about is our vestibular system. It's your body's postural responses, like sitting up nice and straight against gravity. So gravity pulls you to the ground and your body has to resist it. A lot of children will be in constant motion. They like to jump, spin, and just want to move a whole bunch. So some kids may be both sensory avoiding and sensory seeking. They may be oversensitive to some sensations and undersensitive to others. A child's reaction can change from one day to the next, or even throughout the day, depending on the environment or situation, and sensory processing issues aren't a specific learning disability, but they can still have a large impact on learning. Understanding your child's reactions and triggers is key to helping your child cope. If you would like to learn more about sensory processing disorder, we will provide some links down below that can help you better understand how sensory can impact the daily life of your child. I will also include a link to Lucy Jane Miller's book titled Sensational Kids that talks about hope and help for children with sensory processing disorder. Now, relatives, I hope that it really helped you today to learn a little bit more about sensory processing disorder and understand what it is and what symptoms you see in your child to get them the help that they might need. So we can find strategies that work best for your child. You will have to be that sensory detective to find out, what works for them. So there'll be some trial and error, that something might be working. You'll be able to see strategies that are most helpful for your child and how they respond to it. So many different factors can influence your child's sensory needs from day to day, from activity to activity, and even from minute to minute. Therefore, you have to utilize your sensory tools that are safe and effective for your child, for his or her needs. Individual sensory needs are not to be judged as good or bad, right or wrong, they just are. So we have to teach others to understand that an individual's sensory preference needs to be honored. If you have any more questions or would like to set up a personal Zoom appointment, please feel free to call our main line at 414-763-5815. We also know that times are tough, relatives, but the different gears we are experiencing are normal, but sometimes can feel hard to manage. Here at HIR Wellness, we are always offering a helping hand when things seem to be tough. You can always send us an email for more information and support, or call our CARES Warm Line for social and emotional support at 414-748-2592. Someone will be in contact with you within 24 hours or less. Relatives, I just want to thank you so much for being with me here today, for joining us in Sensory Fitness Live of week 7. I really hope you enjoyed your time with us today, just as much as I enjoyed my time with you. I hope to see you next week, Wednesday at 3 p.m. Please contact us if you have any questions or would like more information. We would love to support. Have a great rest of your week, relatives, and we'll see you soon. Bye.